Well, good evening, and welcome to this early evening research presentation that precedes tonight's distinguished speaker lecture with Judy Shepard. We're so happy that you could make it here tonight to learn about some of the exciting work that's going on here at the University of Buffalo. My name is Bob Granfield, and I'm the chair of the Department of Sociology and a professor in sociology. And I'm pleased to welcome you here tonight in my other capacity as the director of the Civic Engagement and Public Policy Strategic Strength initiatives here at UB. This initiative in civic engagement and public policy supports and advances community-based research by members of faculty at UB. We're delighted tonight to be sponsoring this evening's presentation together with the Graduate School of Education, the Dr. Jean Alberti Center for the Prevention of Bullying, Abuse, and School Violence. The tragedy of Matthew Shepard's murder, as painfully retold by Judy Shepard in her book, The Meaning of Matthew, speaks to the importance of our pre-lecture presentation on bullying and its effects. Research has demonstrated that there's a high correlation between being bullied or abused early in life and a pattern later in life of bullying others. I was living in Denver in 1998 when this event occurred, and it may come as no surprise to note that Matthew Shepard's murderer, Aaron McKinney, was himself subjected to bullying and abuse as a young child. The cycle of violence produces many casualties. Tonight's pre-lecture research presentation on this important social issue is emblematic of the kind of civically engaged research that takes place here across UB. I'd like to thank Bill Regan, director of the UB Office of Special Events, together with Professor Greg Dimitriadis and Laura Mangan of the Civic Engagement Public Policy Initiative, and Rebecca Ligman of the Alberti Center for developing and organizing tonight's event. I would now like to hand over the podium to Dr. Timothy Jankowski. Tim is the chair of the Department of Counseling, School, and Educational Psychology in the Graduate School of Education. He will introduce our speaker tonight, Dr. Amanda Nickerson, director of the Dr. Jean M. Alberti Center for Prevention of Bullying, Abuse, and School Violence. And Tim will also moderate the question and answer period. We will end promptly at 7:30, and this should give people plenty of time to walk over to Alumni Arena to see tonight's distinguished speaker, Judy Shepard. Again, thank you for coming, and I hope you enjoy this wonderful program. Tim?
Thank you, Bob. My background and training is in psychology, and I'm a great believer in modeling, so I'm just going to check my cell phone now to make sure that it's turned off. And, it is. So please silence your cell phones if you haven't done so already. As Bob had mentioned, I'm here to introduce the inaugural director of the Dr. Jean M. Alberti Center for the Prevention of Bullying, Abuse, and School Violence, and that is Dr. Amanda Nickerson. She will be presenting a salient definition of bullying to us tonight, share what the research says about some of the effective strategies for prevention and intervention, and highlight some of the research currently being conducted that is designed to further our understanding of this complex and compelling issue. She will speak for about 40 minutes or so, and during that time, if you have questions or comments, please hold on to them, because there will be time after the presentation for a question-answer period. For those of you who may not know, the Alberti Center was established in part through a generous gift by a alumnus from my department, Counseling School and Educational Psychology, Dr. Jean M. Alberti, who is a psychologist in the Chicago area who had a significant amount of experience counseling not only children, but also adults who had been victimized as children by bullies. And she was so affected by it, she gave a very generous donation to the Graduate School of Education. Through her contribution and the considerable efforts of the Graduate School of Education Dean, Dr. Mary Gresham, we created the Alberti Center, and were lucky enough to identify and hire Amanda Nickerson. Essentially, the mission of the center is to conduct research and identify and disseminate resources for the benefit of schools and practitioners and the community on the topics of bullying, prevention, and intervention. I think Dr. Alberti hopes that the center will facilitate broad societal change in attitudes that will result in a substantial reduction in the incidence of bullying in our schools and in our society. A quick synopsis of some of the activities of the Alberti Center. It's in the process of making important connections with faculty and units throughout UB and the schools and agencies in the Western New York area. It's conducting media interviews in print and radio and television, giving presentations such as this one to key stakeholders such as school psychologists, school counselors, and administrators, and UB faculty and students. The topics of research that are currently being examined include school engagement and bullying victimization, bullying self-care, and anxiety in middle school students. Dr. Nickerson came to us in July of 2011. She previously was a tenured faculty member at the University of Albany, SUNY. To date, her research agenda has focused on the critical role of schools, parents, and peers in promoting social, emotional strengths of children and adolescents. She's also a licensed psychologist, certified school psychologist, and a highly productive scholar who has written 4 books, 50 book chapters and journal articles, and has conducted over 100 presentations. So it is my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Amanda Nickerson.
Okay. Thank you so much for being here and for coming for this important Judy Shepard event and also for our pre-event lecture. It's really my honor to be here. I don't have too much time to go over my research in depth, which may be a good thing for you because there would be lots of numbers and things that may not interest you. So what I'm going to attempt to do is really go through some of the highlights of what we know, not only from my own research, but through the research of my distinguished colleagues across the country and in other countries as well. So just an overview of the presentation. I'm actually going to start off with a slideshow that we've developed at the Alberti Center that really tries to take the important information and put it to words and music to make it a little bit more digestible. I'll then go through an overview of bullying, defining what it is and how we can differentiate it from other forms of social interactions and conflict, and then talk about prevention and intervention in terms of whose role is it. And the way that I've organized the presentation is to talk about some conventional wisdom, if you will, or some of the things that you'll commonly hear either from just people in the general public or even in the media. And what I call the reframe is kind of taking that idea and either challenging it or thinking about it a little bit differently within the context of what we know from research and theory. And then, of course, we'll have time for a Q&A. So I just want to very quickly highlight some of my research and the research that we're doing at the Alberti Center. First, we really look at things from a comprehensive perspective that involves community, school, parents, and peers. So my specific research is focused on school practices that are associated with reduced bullying and violence. Also, the role of parents and peers in promoting social emotional strength. I think that's the key of preventing bullying, is to build up strengths and resilience in our youth so that we can prevent these actions from happening and buffer them from when it does happen. And also I've looked at the role of empathy and the parent-child relationship for children who actually do intervene in some ways in bullying situations. So for an overview of bullying, really important to have a common definition of bullying, and we do have one, and it's based on three primary points. One is that bullying involves a power imbalance. The individual who's bullying the target in some way has power over that other person, whether it be physical size, having more money, having intelligence, being popular, being the member of a racial or ethnic majority group versus being in a minority group. There are many different things that can lead to this power differential, but that's an important part of bullying that differentiates it from other forms of aggression. Bullying also involves an intent to cause harm. The intent on the part of the person who's doing it is to hurt the other person either physically or psychologically. And it's usually repeated. This is usually something that happens again and again, and it's a pattern of behavior. So we need to differentiate it from other types of social interactions that can and do occur. Teasing is often mistaken for bullying and vice versa. And really, a couple differences between teasing and bullying. One is that teasing happens between two people of equal strength, if you will, or power, among peers. I can tease you and you'll tease me back. That's part of why that's allowable. And it's usually fun, and it's a give and take. It's good-natured. We do it with our friends, we do it with our family members, and that's okay. I can tease you, you're gonna tease me back, we're gonna laugh. If I notice that it's really upsetting you, I'm going to stop, because that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to make you laugh. So there's a differentiation there. And then conflict, we like to say, if you're married, if you have a job, if you go to school, if you basically exist, then you've probably experienced conflict, and you've probably experienced it today at some point, would be my guess. Normal part of everyday life. And that's a struggle, a dispute, or a misunderstanding between two equal forces. Again, there isn't that power differential, and it's a misunderstanding or difference of opinion. It's not intended to cause harm. Can teasing and conflict turn into bullying? Sure, it can cross a line, but it starts out as something different. Also have to remember that bullying is in the eye of the beholder in some ways. Research has shown that it really depends on who you ask. We know that students report that bullying happens much more than school staff or parents report about kids bullying. We also know that when we ask students about their behavior in bullying situations, they tend to over-report that they would intervene and stand up and do something or try to help afterwards, and they under-report engaging in bullying. So self-report doesn't always reflect what we see in terms of observations. Another common question is like, isn't this just a rite of passage? Isn't this just what happens? And I like to say that it's common, unfortunately, but it's certainly not normal, and we shouldn't treat it as a rite of passage. A rite of passage is something we go through that's going to make us better and stronger in the end, and bullying will definitely not do that for us. But 1 in 3 kids are involved either as a bully, as a target, or as both. And it's important to note that these roles, we may not stay in them forever. Someone could be a bully and a victim, but we don't always talk about that. We tend to categorize them. Certainly we've had aggressive behavior and survival of the fittest across time, species, and cultures. So it is, when some people argue, isn't this just a part of who we are? There's probably a grain of truth to that. However, there's really a danger in viewing it as a rite of passage because of the long-lasting impact that bullying can have, and we don't tolerate other forms of abuse in the society, so why should we tolerate bullying? So what are some signs to look for that a child may be bullied? Doesn't mean if a child shows these signs that they're absolutely being bullied, but they're things to look out for. I think we have a lot of parents in the audience, so this is important for you to know about. Certainly if there's any unexplained illnesses, cuts, bruises, tattered belongings or clothing, those are some of the classic signs, and then you ask, you know, what happened, and you don't really get an answer that seems to make a lot of sense. Avoidance of school and social situations. If there's school avoidance, I always tell my students the first thing you want to ask about is what's going on at school with the peers. How are you getting along with others? Is there bullying going on? Kids that are passive or unassertive and don't seem to have a lot of friends are more likely to be targeted, so this could be a sign. And certainly if there's any changes in behavior, that the child used to be interested in doing things, but they're acting more withdrawn, they're not as interested in the things that they used to be interested in, it could be a sign that they're being bullied. Also accompanied by feelings of self-blame or feeling hopeless. We don't always talk about this, but what are signs that a child could be bullying others? And again, it may be, it's not an exact, there's no profile, if you will. But listen out if the child is referring to others in a negative way, using terms like wimp, loser, gay, fat, you know, routinely, and not really seeming to care that they're saying this. Lacking of empathy, seeing someone else get hurt, hurting somebody else's feelings, and not caring about it, or just saying, you know, it's their fault. Strong need to win or to be the best, and not dealing well when that doesn't work out. A hostile or defiant attitude, angering easily, getting involved in verbal or physical fights, and blaming others. Again, if you're a parent in the room, you can probably go down and say, oh, you know, I have a kid that angers easily, or I have one that doesn't like to lose. And it's about degrees. It's about a pattern of behavior and showing many of these different things that it may be a sign that they're bullying. So what do we do about responding? Responding to a child that's being bullied, probably the most important thing that you can do, and maybe one of the most difficult, is just to listen. I was just looking at a book today where a girl was talking about her narrative, and she said, I came and I told my parents what was happening to me, and my father got upset and called the school, and my mother kind of grilled me about what was happening, and she said, all I really wanted was a hug. So just being there, present with your child, and hearing what they have to say, whether you're a teacher or parent, is critical. Empathizing, that must have been really scary for you. That must have been really hard for you. Thanking them for telling you. Most kids don't tell. And we tell them, tell, and they need to have the response that they're looking for if we want them to continue to engage in that behavior. Taking it seriously without minimizing it and saying, oh, kids can be cruel, you'll be fine tomorrow. Partnering with the child and the school to problem solve, and following up. What about responding to a child who bullies others? It's really important to focus in on that behavior, not the child as a person. You don't want to say you're a bully, but say that behavior wasn't okay and this is why. Applying logical and meaningful consequences, increasing the supervision and monitoring of that behavior, and working with the child to develop a plan for how they're going to prevent this in the future. And absolutely consider professional help to try to increase empathy, perspective taking, and problem solving. Okay, so prevention and intervention, whose role is it? This is where I'm going to go through some conventional wisdom and then the reframe, as I said. This diagram just really shows that there's a role for all of us in this. We used to think about bullying as a problem between the bully and the victim or the target. We now know that it involves the bully, the target, and bystanders, the family, the school, both staff and students, and the larger culture and community. So some of our conventional wisdom when we talk about intervening in some way with the target or the victim. Very commonly here, don't we just need to teach kids to fight back? And on the flip side, well, if you focus on the target or the victim, aren't you sending the message that it's their fault and we're blaming them, and that's not really going to solve the problem? Well, here's a reframe about this. First, in terms of shouldn't kids just stand up and fight back? No. Fighting back is not an effective strategy. And yes, we all hear stories about that child that managed to overcome and just, fought back and won and was never bothered again. However, it's not just adults saying that doesn't work. There's actually a study, the Youth Voices study, asking kids what they found to be most helpful, and fighting back was actually the thing that made bullying situations worse, according to the kids in this study. And part of that is because there is a power differential between the bully and the target, so fighting back is not as easy as it may seem. And then what message are we sending? So if we're saying that this kind of aggressive and violent behavior isn't okay, but this is the way you deal with it, then it's kind of hard for kids to know what to do with that. As for, aren't we just blaming the target if we focus on them? Focusing on the person that's being bullied is really aimed at teaching coping skills, not about blaming. The danger in saying, this is completely not your fault, there's nothing that you could have done, is then that individual might think, there's nothing that I could have done, there's nothing that I can do, and then we're taking away that sense of self-efficacy or being able to feel like you can do something about it. So we really need to teach life and social skills, and we don't do it in isolation. We just don't say this is a problem you need to deal with. We're doing other things in the meantime, but we're not focusing on those coping skills. So what about individuals who bully? Conventional wisdom is that bullies are loners, they suffer from low self-esteem, they do this because they feel really bad about themselves. And another common thing we hear is they just need harsher punishment. Okay? So the reframe with that is that individuals who bully actually aren't more likely to suffer from low self-esteem. In fact, many times they're popular. They report average to even superior self-esteem. And in terms of the need for harsher punishment, most of them have actually experienced harsh punishment. And it's part of what goes into why they behave the way they behave. So to think that that's going to help the situation is probably not the most logical explanation. They do need consequences, but they need meaningful social consequences. They also need to learn other ways of behaving and using their power in a more productive way. So what about bystanders? Conventional wisdom, well, it's peers, they need to stand up and say that this isn't right. They need to fight the good fight. Well, I think as adults, we need to also realize that the bystander effect is alive and well in all of us, meaning that it's not just kids watching bullying that don't do anything, it's most of us. in situations where there's danger or distress, we don't do a lot. And there's quite a few reasons for that. One is the diffusion of responsibility. So we're in a room, we have, I don't know, 75, 100 people here. If something happens, we're all here. Why would I be the one who would do something? There's 99 other people who could have done anything. What makes it me that has to do it? There's also a cost in terms of time, effort, and personal distress. I did a talk recently and said, how many of you stop if someone has a flat tire? And one person raised their hand and everybody else shook their head, and then someone said, well, we're not supposed to. Well, exactly. We're told not to do that because what could happen to us? Yet we expect kids in potentially difficult situations to step in and do something about it. Could be difficult. Also, we know that with adults and children, some of it has to do with the way we think about the world. We tend to think that the world makes sense, that we live in a just world, and that what happens to people is deserved. So I think what we need to do is give kids explicit guidance about how do you recognize a situation as bullying and something where you should do something. How are you going to look at your options about what you can do? Is this a high-risk situation? Is it low risk? What are my different choices? And letting kids know that actually one of the best things they can do is comfort or befriend the person being bullied afterwards. They don't always have to go in and step in and break things up at that time. They can if they have the social wherewithal to do it, but just comforting someone afterwards can be helpful. And it has to happen in a climate where that is expected and appreciated. So what do we think about parents? I often hear things like parents need to wake up and the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Well, this is not going to be productive problem solving, first of all, if we say things like this, right? Everything, there may be a grain of truth, but again, I think we have to reframe the conversation. So for parents, it's absolutely critical to have two things. One is to have high expectations, demandingness, if you will, for behavior. My expectation is that you will treat others like this. This is how I treat others. This is how I expect you to treat others. Be really clear about those rules and expectations. If they're not followed, what are the logical and meaningful consequences? And always teaching better ways to respond. How else could they have done it? Replacing it with another term that they could have used or another way they could behave. On the flip side, or balanced with that high expectation for behaviors, we also have to have warmth and support. Our kids need to know that they're loved, valued, and cherished, and that we are there for them no matter what. I just kind of liked this quote having to do with having high expectations. Parents who are afraid to put their foot down usually have children who step on their toes. I think we are sort of in a climate where we want our kids to be happy and we want them to feel good about themselves. And you know, that's great, but we also, at least with my own kids, I'm like, I want them to do the right thing, and then hopefully they'll feel good about themselves, and we need to give them both. Parents also need to be aware of the reality of bullying and communicate openly about it before it even happens, if it's going to happen. Also, working with the school to be part of the solution, going in guns blazing, ready to blame, is not the best way to get the school involved in it. And also model the behavior that's expected by treating others with dignity and respect. Another quote I like, children are natural mimics who act like their parents despite every effort to teach them good manners. You know, think on a daily basis, those of you that are parents, about what you do and what you say, and how often do you think, oh, do what I say, not what I do. You know, we've got to think about how we're carrying ourselves and modeling for children. School staff, conventional wisdom. Schools need to stop turning a blind eye to this and do something. Well, the reframe there is adults often aren't aware of the bullying that's going on. And there's a lot of good reasons for that. Do we have any teachers in the audience? Okay. How big are your classes? 28? 28 kids? Okay. I have 2 children. I have enough trouble keeping track of what they're doing and knowing what's happening. I don't have 28 in front of me where my primary goal is to teach them academics, to also be cued into every single thing that's going on. So I think sometimes we have to realize that they're not aware of bullying because they're focusing on other things, and kids don't often come to adults and tell them. So really, I think what schools need to do is to gather data to assess, what's going on in our school, what are the needs, what are the kids saying, and use a comprehensive approach to this that includes first and foremost warmth, involvement, and building social emotional strengths to prevent this. But also we need clear policies that include consistent ways of responding if bullying occurs, or when it occurs, a method that people can report bullying, hopefully anonymous, and then a continuum of consequences and interventions, including the opportunity to behave differently in the future. So not just suspension and expulsion, but what are the other tools that we have to try to work with kids to teach them better ways. Policymakers, conventional wisdom, I'm hearing this a lot lately. We need harsher laws to stop this kind of behavior. What I think is that we need really carefully developed laws and policy that aren't reactive or based on emotion, that are going to provide some clarity and guidance and hopefully be based on research. And my own bias is that we don't need another layer of red tape for schools because there's so many other things that they need to be doing. So yes, there is a time and a place for punishment and laws in the criminal justice system, but we have tens of thousands of laws on the books, and we also have the most incarcerated juveniles and adults of any country in the world. So I don't think that the penal system and legal system is necessarily the solution to this complex problem. So just one more slide before we'll go on to questions, but what we're hoping to do at the Alberti Center in the future is look at bullying and victimization within the context of school engagement and wellness. So kids that are victimized and those that are bullying, what are their perceptions of the school environment and how are they doing in terms of their overall health? Parents' responses to children's bullying experiences, are there key things that they can be doing to protect their kids? The factors that contribute to peer intervention in bullying situations, and finally evaluating school efforts to prevent and intervene in bullying. So just a concluding thought, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens like yourselves can change the world, because indeed it's the only thing that ever has. So I really welcome your questions at this point. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nickerson. That was very informative, and I really appreciated the reframe approach that you used to a lot of the common misconceptions around bullying. We'll have about 15 minutes or so for question and answer. Do we have people walking around with microphones?
Right here.
Yes, we have a microphone here. So if you have a question, raise your hand and we'll send a microphone around to you. And as I said, we've got about 15 minutes or so. Okay, go ahead. I see a hand here.
We weren't kidding when we called you a runner, right?
Hello? Okay. Thank you so much for your presentation. I am an assistant professor here at the Department of Communication. I have a comment from the parents' perspective and a question from the researcher's perspective.
Okay.
So I've just moved to Buffalo for about a little over a year, and I have a 7-year-old son who's going to the Williams School District, with the recent event, and obviously I'm very concerned about the situation that's related to school bullying. And just this year, I have had 2 personal incidents in my conversations with my son that has to do with school bullying. And that reminds me of me, role-playing with my son, talking about what you can do in the particular situation. And then recently, going to meet with his teacher the next day when he refuses to go to school after a new haircut, being afraid of being bullied. So, of course, as a parent, I'm terribly concerned. And my observation when I go to the school and I see all these campaigns going on about anti-school bullying, and I see the banner says, don't be a bully, be a buddy. And my son comes home and sings the song, and the lyric says, speak up, reach out, and be a friend to all. That's really nice. That's sweet. And I asked him, do you know what reach out means? He said, no, I don't know. So I am also a researcher in communication, and especially doing work in the design, development, and evaluation of communication campaigns for health promotion, social change, especially looking at the roles of communication technologies in social networks. So we have this understanding of 1,000 tellings are not worth a seeing, and 1,000 seeings are not worth a doing. So my question to you is, what are some of the things that have been done that are really action-oriented? It's one thing, it's very good that we know, and it's catching a lot of public attention. But it's another thing to really, it's a step further to take actions for all these different stakeholders in this related to this issue. And I'm really happy that in your research, you're addressing all these different actors in the network, the community, schools, teachers, staff, students, different roles in the circle. So thank you.
Thank you for your question. Well, certainly I think with young children in early elementary, they try through songs and through simple phrases to tell them reach out and lend a hand, and that may be developmentally appropriate. They can't handle too much there, but we need to accompany that by building skills as well. So one of the most effective things that's been shown are programs in schools that really focus pretty comprehensively on teaching those skills of emotion management, empathy for others, problem solving. So it's not just a quick, this is what you need to do, but it's teaching them what that is, what that looks like, how they can apply it to different situations, role playing, acting it out, giving them feedback about it, putting them in increasingly more emotionally charged situations where they have to try it out, getting them to try it in the real world and bringing it back and talking about it. So, and the programs that are most effective, you usually need at least 10 sessions in the classroom of being able to teach those kinds of skills. So, I mean, if you think about it, and it's going to be a repetitive message that the kids need to get over and over so that they can really understand and learn these skills. That's right here.
Oh, I can speak about it. I'm a speech-language pathologist, and one of the problems I see is that, first of all, they don't have any role models. The children don't. Every TV show they watch is wisecracks. I mean, back to Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. It was be a smart mouth, wisecrack, cut somebody else down, knock them off down. And then they don't have a clue on how to talk to each other. When we do things in the classroom and we do teach communication skills on how to do conflict resolution, it makes a world of change. When you just teach how to say, okay, sit down, and we say things like that. If you say, okay, would you please sit down? Or if you say, if you want a pencil, would you say, could I please have a pencil? And you role model and you teach children polite ways of doing things, guess what? Your classroom calms way down. The unfortunate thing is it gets so built up that you could probably spend every lesson for several weeks to do this. But once you do, you have a calm classroom. Mm-hmm. And you find that people can get along, and once they get the skills. Mm-hmm. And right, girls? Ladies, gentlemen? I have a lot of my students here who aren't even really my students, but when I politely ask them to come, they came.
Good.
Give them a lot of hugs. You're so
All right. Thank you. I mean, I think your comment really underscores the importance of modeling and just giving those replacements, you know, not saying, oh, the way you said that was awful, but here's another way to say it.
Right, framing things in a positive sense, like we were talking about, don't do this. And in fact, I see lists on doors, don't.
Right.
Well, how about saying what you should do? You know, and say, you say behave, you hear parents say behave. Well, what is behave?
Right.
Tell me what behave is, please.
Right.
And so if you put it in a positive sense, put your gum in the garbage can next time, instead of throwing it out, you know, over the railing.
Right. Good. Yes.
Thanks. I have two questions for you. One is, can you give us some examples of some, concrete, say, consequences to offer to bullies? You gave us, if there are options, but if you gave us some, consequences, that would be helpful. And also, I'm also a parent in the Williamsville School District and a pediatrician, and I'm really struggling with how to engage my school in this, and they're really standoffish. It's not a problem. Messaging, and there is a problem, and I'm really struggling with how to engage my school.
Okay. The first one, in terms of the kind of continuum of consequences for bullying behavior, I think you really, personally, I think you have to look at the context. Was this the first time? Was this an ongoing pattern of behavior and things like that? But I think that the consequences that we have to relate to the behavior and the interventions that we have. So, concrete example, if we know that an individual is bullying others in the hallway or in the bathrooms or something like that, you know what? I know you're 14 years old and you should be able to walk the halls by yourself and go to the bathroom by yourself, but you've lost that privilege for the next week. You need to get a special pass, you need somebody to walk with you, because that's where the behavior is occurring, and you clearly need some supervision around that. Another thing is what's meaningful and giving that person the power and social status. Are they a star athlete on a sports team, and engaging with the coach in the athletic department and saying, you know what, just like if they were caught drinking or something else, we wouldn't let them play in the game because that's our code of conduct. Well, they bullied someone in this way, they need to be benched for Saturday's game. So making the consequences linked to what's meaningful, and pairing it with teaching a better way, helping to engage them in what's your plan for the future, because this can't happen again. What are you going to do differently? In terms of engaging the school, I'm also a parent in the Williamsville district. I may feel differently than some of you because I've been really impressed with what the school's done, and they've also engaged me in the center in trying to work with them and looking at what they did. I did 4 hours of professional development with them last Friday, and so I do see schools and staff that are committed to making a difference on this. So I may be a little bit biased in that, but I mean, if you feel like your school is not listening, I guess, who is it that you're talking to? What kind of messages are you bringing? Are you saying, can we partner together? How can I help you in this? What are you struggling with? Or is it, you need to do something about this problem. This is a problem. I think it's about how we start the conversation, what ideas we have to bring to the table, realizing that they have constrictions in terms of time and money and other priorities, but what are some of the ideas? Can we get a committee going? Do you already have a committee? Is that something that I can join? How else can I help? So I think trying to partner in the solutions is important. Yes?
I'm a parent of 3 young people. My middle son, everybody hear me? You can say they don't think they have a problem hearing me. My middle son is a young man with high functioning autism, and he has endured years of harassment and bullying. He has thankfully survived the public school system, and but is still engage our 15-year-old daughter in a conversation about what's going on in the school, because I know what's going on in the school. I see it, I hear it, I monitor the children's Facebook comments, things like that. And she tells me, I don't really see it. And the principal on a announcement in bullying week, anti-bullying week last week, was saying, as he was introducing the topic for the day, well, we don't really have a problem here. And I'm thinking, hello, wake up, where are you people, where am I that you people are not at? And trying to engage, and in the process, I have to say, there were several teachers and other school staff that have taken a proactive role. But how do you go from reactive to proactive, to really not just say, okay, this is the hot topic, this is the mandate, we have to talk about this, so we're talking about it, and getting beyond that to actually seeing what's going on in our school. Because it's not just the school, it's the community at large.
Right. Well, I think one way to do it, and I'm a researcher, so, but I've also heard people from schools say this, is getting data. I mean, having that, a lot of schools will say, well, that's not really a problem here. If you walk around, people really respect each other. And then they do surveys, anonymous surveys with the students and ask how often they've seen the following things. And typically it's about a third of, typically it's much higher. It's more like 60 to even 70% say, yes, I've seen this, this, and this, and about a third say that they've been actively engaged in some way. Now, whether or not students see that as bullying is something different. It may be so common what they see that when you tease out the specific behaviors, then that's what's different. So one, I think, is getting data somehow and convincing the school to look at it. The Dignity for All Students Act is coming, and so that should be another motivational force if the school isn't already motivated to kind of step up their efforts in that regard. And in terms of talking to our kids about it, you know, I don't want to shy away from using the term bullying, but it is out there so much right now that I think it almost has the danger of being overused or underused. You know, like we're going to call everything bullying or we're going to brush it all under the rug. So let's talk more specifically about behaviors and incidents and what are you seeing that makes you believe that bullying is common, and talking about that and talking with our kids about this. Okay, you say there isn't bullying, but what about when I was on the playing field the other day and I saw that one kid shove the other kid that was smaller or say, hey, wimp, and maybe teenagers will say, well, they were just kidding. But have a conversation about that. Okay, is that, well, would you do that? And what's that like? So having it be a two-way street. We don't truly know their reality, but we just have to have the conversation about it. Yes?
I'm a school social worker, school psychologist, and I saw your presentation at my phone. And I was wondering what your thoughts were on Avoidance, that the school program that's and does the school have to buy into second step or Avoidance to be effective in dealing with the issue?
Okay. For those who don't know, the Avoidance Bullying Prevention Program is probably one of the most well-known bullying prevention programs, and it probably has some of the most evidence, that and second step and steps to respect. But the programs, you need to have commitment and buy-in on the part of the school, or they will not work the way they're supposed to. They're only effective to the extent that they are implemented with fidelity and embraced by the school. And a lot of them take a really comprehensive approach that's really a commitment. And if the school's not willing to do that, I would suggest not even taking the time and money to try to do that. Yes.
Doctor, have you ever dealt with a situation where the parents of a child would bully the kids?
I'm sorry.
I have a son who has friends, and the mother has and they, after they go to school, sometimes they go out to eat and stuff like that. The mother says that she has heard that the kids have gone to the mall and have taken drugs and smoked. The school got information about that, and suddenly the school, the guidance counselor, suddenly came to us, who's here, and sat us down and said, you shouldn't do this, they should have to have drug tests and stuff like that. This is a situation where the mother of a child is actually causing a situation of bullying, causing a problem.
Yeah, when adult behavior, the specifics of that I can't comment on, but certainly there are situations where parents themselves are the ones doing the bullying and engaging in the behavior, and that is a whole other. I hear from school administrators that they're getting feedback that some parents bully other parents on Facebook, and it's kind of like, at what point does the school say, oh my goodness, what is our responsibility here? And unfortunately, it happens. Yes, so I have heard of incidents, and I don't have an easy answer except to say it really starts with the adults, and what can we expect kids to do if these are their models.
Okay, I'm afraid that we're out of time, and we can't field any more questions. Thank you, Dr. Nickerson, for the
Thank you very much.
presentation, and to our participants for their questions. And
Thank you for coming. Have a good evening.